On my father's last night, he grabbed my mother's hand and whispered, "Swear you'll hurt our daughter over my grave. It's the only way I can rest in peace." And I, hiding behind the door, felt the weight of that curse that would last for years. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, my dear friends. What a joy to talk with you today. I'm Janet Simmons, 67 years old, born in a small town in Kentucky, but now I live here in Louisville. I'm sitting on my porch, where I can see the Ohio River flowing peacefully, carrying its waters and stories to the Mississippi. I always like to start my day here, feeling the cool morning breeze while preparing a cup of chamomile tea that I grow in my backyard. These days, my greatest pleasure is making lace. I learned this craft after turning 50, imagine that. It's never too late to learn something new, isn't it? My hands aren't as steady as they used to be, but they can still create small pieces that I sell at our local craft fair. The younger ladies always ask me how I manage to have so much patience to intertwine the threads with those wooden bobbins. And I answer that life taught me to have patience, to wait for the right time for things. I started with lace after my daughter Irene gave me a complete kit as a gift. She said, "Mom, you need to occupy your mind with something beautiful." And she was right. Each piece I make carries a little bit of my story, my pain, and also my joy. It's as if I'm weaving not just the threads, but also the patches of my own life. My little house is simple, but very cozy. The walls are a light yellow, reminiscent of the rising sun. I have my plants, my little religious pictures on the wall, and family photos scattered throughout the living room. Oh, and my little dog Spot, a mutt I adopted 5 years ago when I found him abandoned on the street. He's here at my feet while I talk to you, sleeping peacefully as if there's no tomorrow. You know, when I look out the window and see the river waters, I think about how life is just like that. Sometimes calm, sometimes agitated, but always following its course. And I, like this river, have also gone through many rapids, but now I'm in a more serene moment, thank God. And you, my dear friends who are watching me now, tell me in the comments, which town are you watching from? And what time of day did you find this video? Are you having your morning coffee, or perhaps resting after lunch? Or are you like me, who likes to watch my little things before bed? I always read all the comments, and I'm so happy to know where you're from and when you take time out of your day to listen to this grandma's stories. Let me know, okay? Let's create a chain of affection. Today I want to share with you a story that I've kept in my heart for a long time. A story about promises, about pain, but also about liberation. You know, my dears, sometimes we need to talk about difficult things so that other people know they're not alone in this world. And that's why I decided to tell you about the last request my father made before leaving this world. It's not easy to go back so many years in time and relive certain memories, but I know that perhaps my story can help someone who's going through something similar. Because in the end, that's what unites us as human beings, isn't it? Our stories, our pains, and our overcomings. So make yourselves comfortable, grab a tea or coffee, and let's travel together to the past, so I can tell you how a simple girl from rural Kentucky faced one of the most frightening promises I've ever heard in my life. I was born in 1958 in a simple house in Hazard, Kentucky, by the river. At that time, my dears, life was very different from what it is today. We didn't have electricity at home, just oil lamps. And water? We fetched it from the well or the river, carrying buckets on our heads. Just imagine. My family was small. Me, my mother Dolores, and my father Gerald. My mother was a petite woman, with a gentle voice, always wearing printed dresses and a scarf tied around her head to protect from the sun when she went to wash clothes in the river. She had small hands, but calloused from so much work. She made beautiful embroidery that she sold to the ladies in town. It was from her that I learned the value of silent work, the kind that nobody applauds, but that sustains the home. My father worked at the coal mine. A tall man with thick eyebrows that joined in the middle of his forehead when he was angry, and that happened frequently. In Hazard, everyone respected him, or rather, feared him. On the street, he was Mr. Gerald, greeting everyone, smiling at the children. But at home, oh, at home, he was like another person. Our house was made of wood, painted light blue, with just 3 rooms: the living room that was also the kitchen, my parents' bedroom, and a small room where I slept. The bathroom was a separate outhouse in the yard. We had a large piece of land with many fruit trees, apple trees, cherry trees, and even a small vegetable garden in the back. It was my favorite place to play, hidden among the trees where nobody could find me. At school, I was a diligent girl. I really liked to study, especially math. Miss Nancy always said I had a knack for numbers. I remember her fondly, a lady with thick glasses and hair tied in a tight bun who smelled like lavender. She was the first to tell me that I could be somebody in life, that I should continue studying. When I came home from school, I would run to show my notebooks to my mother. She always smiled, patted my head, and said, "How nice, honey. You'll go far." But when my father arrived and saw my enthusiasm for studies, he would furrow those eyebrows and grumble, "What's the use of so much studying for a girl? In the end, she'll just get married and take care of the house anyway." His words hurt me inside, but I continued studying in secret by the light of the oil lamp after everyone was asleep. I had a dream hidden in my heart. I wanted to be a teacher, like Miss Nancy. I wanted to teach other children, especially girls, to dream of a different future. The games of my childhood were simple: jumping rope, playing house with rag dolls my mother made, playing jacks with the neighborhood children. My best friend was Nora, the daughter of our neighbor Mrs. Betty. We two were inseparable. She had such a delightful laugh that it was contagious. On weekends, we played school, and I was always the teacher, of course. During harvest season, we helped with picking. The children would stay below while the men climbed the trees. It was a celebration. Afterwards, we helped sort and prepare the fruit. Nobody used machines. It was all done by hand. My hands would get stained, and my tongue too. We'd eat them fresh from the trees, the traditional way here in Kentucky. But not everything was rosy in my childhood. When my father drank, and that happened almost every weekend, the house turned into hell. He would arrive stumbling, red eyes, the smell of whiskey that could be detected from afar. Anything became a reason to yell at my mother. She would lower her head and accept everything silently, as if it were normal, as if she deserved it. I would hide under the bed, cover my ears, but I could still hear the shouting, the sound of slaps, my mother's restrained crying. The next morning, it was as if nothing had happened. My mother prepared breakfast, served my father, who ate in silence, and then left for work. The purple marks on her arms were covered by long sleeves, even in the strong Kentucky heat. And so life went on, in a cycle that seemed endless. When I was about 10 years old, something happened that changed the course of our family. My father fell ill. At first, it was just stomach pains that he disguised. Then he began to lose weight, his skin turned yellowish, and he started missing work. The doctor at the health clinic said it was a liver problem and that he needed to go to Cincinnati for tests. I remember the concern on my mother's face, not for the love she felt, but for fear of what would become of us without the money he brought home. There were months of coming and going to Cincinnati. The situation got worse, and with it, my father's temperament. The illness didn't soften him. On the contrary, it seemed to have awakened an even crueler side. He blamed my mother for the disease, saying it was her cooking that had ruined his liver. He even blamed me, saying that I gave too much trouble, that the studies cost too much. At that time, I began to feel a constant weight in my chest, a sadness that wouldn't pass, a desire to disappear. It was at this time that I met Mrs. Clara, a lady who sold medicinal herbs at the farmer's market. She saw my sad look when I went to buy the herbs the doctor had prescribed for my father, and she always set aside a little chamomile for me. "It's good for calming a troubled heart," she would say. And it was she who taught me to make tea and recognize healing plants. It was knowledge that I carried throughout my life. At the end of 1970, when I was 12 years old, the doctor said there was nothing more they could do. my father returned home for his last days. The house, which was already a heavy place, became even more somber, the smell of medicines mixed with that of illness. My mother became a nurse, changing bandages, giving medicines, cleaning the room that now smelled of mold and something else, something that only later I understood to be the smell of death approaching. I tried to help as best I could, but my father didn't want me around. "Go study, girl. You're not even good for taking care of your sick father," he would say with an increasingly weak voice, but still capable of hurting. And so, between school and the increasingly sad house, I entered adolescence, carrying a weight that no child should carry. I remember as if it were yesterday those last months of 1970. My father's condition was rapidly worsening. The doctors in Cincinnati had already said there was nothing more to be done, and he was back home, wasting away day by day. His room had transformed into a somber place with the smell of medicines and suffering. The curtains always closed left the environment in dim light, even during the day. I had just turned 13 when the situation at home became truly unbearable. Despite the advanced disease, my father had not lost the capacity to be cruel. In fact, it seemed that the proximity of death had made him even more bitter, as if he blamed the whole world for his fate. And we, his family, were the closest targets of his anger. "Dolores, come here, you useless woman," he would shout from the room, even when he barely had the strength to lift his head from the pillow. And my mother would run, always solicitous, always fearful. "What is it, Gerald? Do you need something? This food is garbage. Not even when I'm dying can you make something decent." He would spit the words with hatred, while my mother collected the almost untouched plate, her eyes watery, but without shedding a tear in front of him. I observed everything from the door, feeling a lump in my throat. I wanted to defend my mother, to say that she was doing her best, that she spent sleepless nights taking care of him, that her hands were cracked from working so hard. But the words remained stuck. The fear was greater than the courage. At school, my performance began to drop. I couldn't concentrate on classes anymore. My head was always at home, worried about what might be happening. Miss Nancy noticed the change and, one day, called me to talk after class. "What's happening, Janet? You've always been one of the best students, but lately it seems like your head is elsewhere." I tried to pretend, to say that everything was fine, but Miss Nancy had eyes that seemed to see through lies. I sat in a corner of the empty classroom and, for the first time, I broke down. I told her about my father's illness, about how he treated my mother, about the constant fear we felt at home. I told her that sometimes I wished it would all end soon, and then I felt guilty for thinking that way. Miss Nancy listened in silence, her eyes full of compassion. When I finished, she held my hands and said something I never forgot. "Janet, there are people whose hearts are softened by illness, and there are those whose hearts are hardened even more by illness. It's not your fault or your mother's. You're doing the best you can in a difficult situation." Her words were like a balm to my tormented soul. For the first time, someone validated what I felt, someone understood what we were going through. Miss Nancy lent me some books and said that when life at home was too difficult, I could take refuge in the stories. Books are portals to other worlds, Janet. When reality is too hard, you can always escape for a few hours. And that's what I did. I began to read avidly, hidden under the covers with a flashlight after everyone was asleep. I read The Little Prince, The Adventures of Tom Sawyer, and other books that Miss Nancy lent me. Those stories became my refuge, my escape valve. At home, my father's health visibly deteriorated. His body, once strong and imposing, was now skeletal, the yellowish skin stretched over the bones. His eyes, however, maintained that gleam of fury, especially when he saw me. He seemed to have developed a special aversion to me, as if my youth and my dreams were an insult to his condition. "This girl just brings expenses," he would grumble to my mother when he thought I wasn't listening. "So much studying for what? A woman needs to learn to take care of the house, find a husband. I won't be here to support this brat forever." The irony was that he really wouldn't be, but not for the reasons he thought. Death was approaching. We all knew it. Dr. Wilson from Hazard came to the house once a week, and his visits became increasingly brief. There was nothing more to do besides administering morphine to ease the pain. It was during one of those visits that I noticed something strange. The doctor had just left, and I was in the kitchen helping my mother wash the dishes when I heard my father calling her. His voice was different, not the usual shout, but something almost conspiratorial. "Dolores, come here. I need to tell you something." My mother dried her hands on her apron and went to the bedroom. Moved by curiosity, I silently followed and stopped by the partly open door, where I could hear without being seen. "The girl will have to help pay for the funeral," my father was saying in a low voice. "I don't want to be buried like a pauper." "But Gerald, how is she going to help?" "She's only 13, my mother replied, her voice trembling. "There's Adam, from the mine. He always thought the girl was pretty. He said he would pay well to, you know." I felt an icy shiver run down my spine. I didn't completely understand what my father was suggesting, but I knew it was something terrible. "No, Gerald. She's just a child, for God's sake." For the first time, I heard my mother oppose him, albeit in a low and frightened voice. "A child? She's already a young lady, already has a woman's body, and she'll need to learn to fend for herself after I'm gone. Better start soon." I recoiled in horror, my heart beating so hard that I was sure they could hear it. I ran to the yard and hid among the apple trees, trying to process what I had just heard. My own father was suggesting, no, it couldn't be true. I must have misunderstood. But in the following weeks, I noticed this Adam, a fat man with a thick mustache who worked with my father at the mine, appearing at our house more frequently. He brought groceries, medicines, sometimes even a little money. And he looked at me in a way that made me feel dirty, even when fully dressed. "Your daughter is becoming a beautiful young lady, Mrs. Dolores," he would say, stroking his oily mustache. "She takes after her mother." I avoided being at home when he came. I made up excuses, said I needed to study at Nora's house, anything to not be present. But the constant anxiety began to consume me. I started having nightmares, losing my appetite. I developed an irrational fear of being alone, especially when my mother needed to go out to buy something or resolve some matter. The disease and the fear left me in a constant state of alert, like a cornered animal. I couldn't concentrate on my studies anymore. I had no more energy to play with my friends. It was as if a dark cloud hovered over me, stealing all the joy and light from my life. And the worst thing was that I had no one to talk to about it. My mother was always busy taking care of my father, and I didn't want to burden her with my fears, especially because I suspected she feared the same thing I did. January of 1971 arrived with heavy snows, typical of the Kentucky winter. The snow fell in dense curtains, transforming the dirt roads of Hazard into impassable mires. The constant sound of snow on our tin roof mixed with my father's increasingly difficult breathing. The doctors had said it was a matter of days. Our house became even more isolated because of the snow. Few visitors risked facing the mud and snow to reach us. Only Dr. Wilson and Adam appeared regularly. The doctor, out of professional duty, Adam, for interests that gave me the chills. That man's constant presence became a torment. He would appear without warning, usually when my mother was busy with my father. He would sit in the living room, legs wide open, occupying space, small and moist eyes following me wherever I went. "Come here, little Janet," he would call, patting his knee like someone calling a dog. "Come talk to Uncle Adam." I would make up excuses, say I needed to help my mother, that I had homework to do, but I couldn't always escape. Sometimes he would corner me in the kitchen or in the narrow hallway that led to the bedrooms. "Your father told me that you need to help with the expenses," he would whisper, his breath of whiskey and tobacco making me nauseous. "I can help you, you know. I have a little money saved up." His hands, thick and calloused from work in the mine, would try to touch my face, my hair. I would dodge as best I could, my heart racing, a feeling of nausea rising in my throat. On a particularly snowy afternoon, when my mother had gone to the pharmacy to get more morphine for my father, Adam appeared. I was alone with my father, who was sleeping under the effect of the medications. I tried not to answer the door, pretend there was no one home, but he continued knocking, each time harder. "I know you're in there, girl. Open this door." Afraid that the noise would wake my father and worsen his condition, I ended up opening it. Adam entered, shaking his wet hat, splashing water on the clean floor. "Your mother isn't here?" he asked, looking around with his small and astute eyes. "She went to the pharmacy. She should be back soon," I replied, keeping my distance, hands nervously gripping the apron I was wearing. "Better that way," he smiled, revealing teeth yellowed by tobacco. "We can talk in private." I took a step back, feeling the cold wall against my back. There was nowhere to run. Adam approached, his body blocking any escape route. "Your father told me that you're going to help pay for his funeral," he said, his voice low and hoarse. "Do you know how you're going to do that?" Before I could answer, we heard a noise coming from my father's room. A moan, followed by a dry cough. Adam backed away, annoyed by the interruption. "I'll see what he needs," I said quickly, taking advantage of the opportunity to escape. My father was awake, his yellowed eyes fixed on the ceiling. When he saw me, he gestured for me to approach. "Who's there?" he asked, his voice almost inaudible. "It's Adam, Dad. He came to see how you are." A strange smile formed on his dried lips. "Call him here. And your mother, where is she?" "She went to get your medicines. She should be back soon." Reluctantly, I called Adam to the room. He entered, removing his hat in a gesture of false respect. The two men exchanged glances, a silent communication that I couldn't decipher, but that made my stomach churn with apprehension. "How are you, buddy?" Adam asked, approaching the bed. "Dying," my father responded dryly. "But before I go, we need to settle that matter." Adam nodded, casting a sidelong glance at me. "All set, buddy. I'll take care of everything. Your family won't want for anything." The way he said, "take care," made my blood freeze. There was something predatory in his tone, in his look. My father made a gesture for me to leave the room, and I obeyed, relieved to get away from them, but terrified by what they might be arranging. I stayed in the kitchen, pretending to organize the dishes, but with my ears alert. The voices were too low for me to understand what they were saying, but the conspiratorial tone was evident. A few minutes later, Adam left the room, adjusting his belt with a satisfied air. "Your father wants to talk to you," he said, passing by me and touching my arm in a way that made me want to run to the river and wash myself. "I'll wait for your mother to return." I entered the room with my heart pounding. My father was more agitated, trying to sit up in bed, the effort making his breathing even more laborious. "Come here," he ordered, pointing to the edge of the bed. I approached cautiously, maintaining some distance. Even debilitated by the disease, my father still terrified me. "You're already a young lady," he began, his eyes traveling over my body in a way that made me feel exposed, vulnerable. "And soon I'll be dead. Your mother can't support you two alone." I remained silent, the lump in my throat preventing any response. "Adam is a good man, has some money saved up. He'll help you, but he needs gratitude." He coughed, a harsh sound that seemed to tear his chest. "You understand what I'm saying?" I understood perfectly, and the horror of that proposal left me paralyzed. My own father was offering me, like merchandise, to that man who caused me so much disgust and fear. "Dad, I can't," I stammered, tears blurring my vision. His expression changed instantly. The mask of false concern gave way to the familiar anger. "You can't? And who said you have a choice? Do you think I worked my whole life to be buried like a dog? Adam will pay for a good coffin, a good ceremony, and will take care of you afterwards. It's the least you can do for your father." His words hit me like slaps. I backed away, trembling, unable to believe what I was hearing. At that moment, the front door opened, and I heard my mother's voice calling. I had never felt such relief in my entire life. "Don't tell her anything," my father threatened in a low voice. "She doesn't need to know the details. She just needs to accept Adam's help." I left the room dazed, my legs weak, my mind in turmoil. My mother was in the kitchen, storing the medicines she had brought. Adam was talking to her, his tone falsely solicitous. "Mrs. Dolores, don't worry about anything. After my buddy passes, I'll take care of everything. The funeral, the expenses, you two." I saw the look of distrust my mother gave him, a spark of resistance she rarely showed. "That's very kind of you, Mr. Adam, but we'll manage." "Your daughter and I have already talked," he insisted, looking at me with a smile that made my stomach churn. "Isn't that right, little Janet?" I couldn't respond. Panic closed my throat, and I felt the room spinning around me. Before anyone could say anything else, I ran outside, into the heavy snow, preferring to get soaked than to stay one more minute in that house with those men. I ran until I couldn't anymore, my feet sinking in the mud, the snow mixing with the tears on my face. I ended up reaching Mrs. Clara's house, the herb lady. She saw me through the window and opened the door, alarmed at my state. "Child of God, what happened? Come in, come dry off." Between sobs, I told her what had happened, what my father and Adam were planning. Mrs. Clara listened in silence, her wrinkled face contracting with indignation. When I finished, she held my hands between hers, rough but comforting. "Listen well, my child. No true father would do this to his own daughter. This is not right. It is not God's will. You need to tell your mother everything. She needs to know." "She won't believe me," I sobbed. "She always does what my father says." "Then you need to be strong for both of you," Mrs. Clara said firmly. "While your father is alive, don't stay alone with him or with this Adam. And afterwards, you need to leave here. Go far away." Her words planted a seed in my mind. The idea of fleeing, of escaping that nightmare, began to take shape. But how? Where would we go? And how to convince my mother to abandon everything she knew? The answer would come sooner than I imagined, and in a way I could never predict. The week that followed my escape to Mrs. Clara's house was the tensest of my life. I returned home only because I had nowhere else to go, but something had changed. For the first time, I saw my mother confront my father, albeit timidly. "This isn't right, Gerald," she said in a low voice when she thought I wasn't listening. "She's just a child, our daughter." "Shut up, woman. I know what's best for this family. When I die, who's going to take care of you? Adam has means, has his own house." I kept myself as far away from home as possible, spending most of my time at school or at Mrs. Clara's house, which had become my refuge. It was she who advised me to never be alone, not even for a minute. "Carry this little knife in your waistband, hidden," she told me one day, handing me a small kitchen knife. "It's not to use, it's just to give you courage. But if that man tries anything, you scream so loud that even the dead will hear." In that second week of January, my father worsened drastically. Dr. Wilson began to come every day, and on Wednesday he announced that it was a matter of hours. The news spread quickly through the neighborhood, and soon our small house was full of people, some genuinely concerned, others merely curious to see death up close. And of course, Adam was there, occupying space in the living room, as if he were already the owner of the house. He followed me with his eyes whenever I passed, a repugnant smile on his thick lips. I did my best to stay near other people all the time, especially Mrs. Clara, who had brought herbs to help with the smell of disease that permeated the house. It was at the beginning of the night, when most of the neighbors had already left, that everything happened. My mother was in the kitchen, preparing tea for the few who still remained. I was sitting in a corner of the living room, hugging my knees, trying to make myself invisible. Adam was talking in a low voice with Mr. George, another colleague from the mine, when my father started calling, his voice a weak but urgent whisper. Dolores, Dolores. My mother ran to the room, and I became even more huddled in my corner, aware that Adam was not taking his eyes off me. A few minutes later, my mother appeared at the door of the room, her face pale. Mr. Gerald is calling you, Janet, she said, her voice trembling slightly. And you too, Mr. Adam. My heart raced. I didn't want to enter that room, much less with Adam. But there was something in my mother's look, a kind of resolution that I had never seen before, that gave me courage to get up and go. The room was in dim light, illuminated only by a candle that my mother had lit next to the image of the Virgin Mary. My father was lying down, looking more like a corpse than a living man. The yellow skin stretched over the bones, the sunken eyes, the difficult and noisy breathing. The smell was unbearable, a mixture of medicines, sweat, and imminent death. Come closer, he whispered, making a weak gesture with his hand. I want you to swear something. I approached reluctantly, keeping my distance from Adam, who positioned himself on the other side of the bed. My mother remained at the door, like a silent sentinel. Adam, my father began, his voice almost inaudible, you promised me that you'll take care of my family after I'm gone. Of course, buddy, Adam replied, the false solemnity in his voice causing me nausea. I'll take care of them as if they were my own family. The way he said that, looking at me with those small and greedy eyes, made my stomach churn. I gripped the small knife hidden in the waistband of my dress, feeling the cold handle against my skin. And you, Janet, my father continued, turning his yellowed face to me, I want you to swear that you'll obey your mother and Adam after I'm gone, that you'll do what's necessary to help the family. I remained silent, unable to respond. How could I promise such a thing? How could I voluntarily hand myself over to the man who caused me so much fear and revulsion? Swear, girl! My father's voice suddenly gained strength, startling me. Swear that you'll do what Adam says. It was at this moment that something unexpected happened. My mother, who had always been so submissive, so silent, took a step forward. No, Gerald, she said, her voice firm despite the slight tremor. Our daughter won't swear anything like that. My father turned his face to her, surprised by the unprecedented boldness. What? What did you say, woman? I said no, my mother repeated, now advancing into the room. I know what you and Adam are planning. I heard you two talking, and I won't allow it. Adam's expression changed instantly. The affable smile gave way to a mask of anger. Mrs. Dolores, don't get into this. It's a matter between men. A matter between men? My mother repeated, and for the first time in my life, I saw fury in her gentle eyes. You're talking about my daughter, my 13-year-old daughter. My father tried to sit up, the effort making him cough violently. Shut up, woman. You don't know anything. Yes, I do, Gerald. I know that you want to sell our daughter to this man, in exchange for a coffin and a few coins. I know that you two planned this for weeks, behind my back. But it's over. Even if it's the last thing I do in this life, I won't let this happen. The room was silent for a moment, broken only by my father's laborious breathing. Then, Adam went around the bed, approaching my mother with clenched fists. You'll regret this, Mrs. Dolores. When your husband dies, who's going to pay the bills? Who's going to feed you? Do you think you'll be able to support the house by taking in laundry? It was then that I saw, for the first time in my life, my mother confront a man as an equal. She didn't back down an inch, despite being at least a head shorter than Adam. I'd rather starve than see my daughter in your hands, Mr. Adam. I'd rather work until I die than sell my daughter's soul. Now, get out of my house. Get out and don't come back. Adam's face contorted with fury. For a terrible second, I thought he was going to hit my mother right there, in front of my dying father. Instead, he took a step back, pointing his fat finger in her direction. You'll regret this, woman. Both of you will. I have friends at the mine. I have friends in the police. You won't be able to get work anywhere in this town. You'll starve to death, both of you." "That's in God's hands, Mr. Adam," my mother responded calmly. "Now please, leave my house. My husband is dying and deserves peace in his last moments." Adam left, stomping hard, not without casting a final threatening look in my direction. When we heard the front door slam, my mother turned to my father, who had watched everything with eyes wide with surprise and impotent fury. "How dare you?" he began, but a new bout of coughing interrupted him. My mother approached the bed, no longer the submissive wife, but a woman determined to protect her daughter. "Gerald, you can hate me for the rest of your life, which won't be very long from what I see, but I won't let you do this to our daughter. I won't let you continue controlling me from the other side of life." Then, turning to me, she said with a calmness I had never seen before, "Janet, go to Mrs. Clara's house now. Stay there until I call you." I obeyed immediately, running through the dark night to the old herb lady's house. I spent the night there, lying on a mat, unable to sleep, thinking about the confrontation I had witnessed and what would come after. The next morning, Mrs. Clara woke me with the news. "Your father passed away during the night, my child. Your mother came to let us know. She said for you to stay here a little longer until she resolves some things." I stayed at Mrs. Clara's house for 2 days. On the 3rd day, my mother came to get me, her eyes red from crying, but with a new resolution on her face. "Your father was buried yesterday," she told me simply. "Few neighbors came. Adam didn't come." "And now, Mom? What will become of us?" I asked, the fear of the future tightening my chest. She took my hands between hers, looking me directly in the eyes. "Now, my daughter, we're leaving here. Far away, where nobody knows us, where we can start over. Mrs. Clara spoke of an acquaintance of hers in Cincinnati, who can help us find work. It's a good distance away, but the farther, the better." Something inside me broke and remade itself at that moment. The relief of knowing that I wouldn't be handed over to Adam. The sadness for my father's death. Despite everything, still my father. The fear of the unknown. The hope of a new life. I hugged my mother, crying all the tears that I had suppressed for so long. "It will be all right, Mom," I whispered between sobs. "We'll make it." We left Hazard one morning in February of 1971 when the snow had given a break. We carried only a cardboard suitcase with our clothes and a few personal belongings. The rest was left behind, sold at low prices, or simply abandoned. My mother managed to gather some money by selling the furniture of the house and the kitchen utensils. It wasn't much, but it would be enough for the first times in Cincinnati. Mrs. Clara accompanied us to the bus station, where we would take the bus that would take us to the big city. It was a Greyhound that made the journey daily, carrying passengers and goods. Before we said goodbye, the old herb lady pulled me aside and placed a small package in my hands. "It's a protection charm, my child," she explained in a low voice. "It has cleansing herbs, protection herbs, and path-opening herbs. Always carry it with you. It will help you in your new life." I thanked her, moved, keeping the amulet in the pocket of my dress. It was the only gift I had received in a long time, and it came loaded with genuine affection. I hugged Mrs. Clara tightly, knowing that I would probably never see her again. "Thank you for everything you did for us," I whispered, my voice choked. "Go with God, girl, and remember, never again let anyone diminish you. You have strength inside you more than you imagine." The journey to Cincinnati lasted about 3 hours. I sat by the window of the bus, watching the road pass slowly. The snowy mountains of Kentucky carried trunks and leaves, following their inevitable course to the valleys. I thought about how our lives were like that too, carried by the current of events, sometimes fighting against the tide, sometimes letting ourselves be carried. My mother remained silent during almost the entire journey, her eyes fixed on the horizon, her hands nervously clutching the handle of the suitcase. Only when we sighted the first signs of Cincinnati did she turn to me with a tired smile. "We're going to start over, daughter. Just the two of us." We arrived in Cincinnati without knowing anyone beyond the name that Mrs. Clara had given us, Adele Martin, a midwife who lived in the Over-the-Rhine neighborhood. With some difficulty and many questions, we managed to find her house at the end of the afternoon. It was a simple brick construction, painted a faded blue, with a small yard full of medicinal plants. Mrs. Adele received us with initial distrust, which soon transformed into welcoming when we mentioned Clara's name. The two had met years before at a gathering of healers and midwives of the Midwest. "Clara sent me a letter last week talking about you," she said, inviting us in. "She told me roughly about the situation. You can stay here until you get settled. I have a small room in the back that's empty." The room was small, barely fitting 2 mats on the floor, but it was clean and dry. For the first time in a long time, I felt that we could breathe without fear. That night, lying next to my mother, I heard her crying softly. They weren't tears of sadness, I realized, but of relief. The weight she had carried for so many years was finally beginning to dissipate. In the first days in Cincinnati, we stayed at Mrs. Adele's house, helping with the household chores in exchange for lodging and food. The midwife was an energetic woman, despite her almost 60 years. She knew everyone in the neighborhood and soon began to introduce us to the right people. "Dolores, you know how to sew, don't you? Mrs. Judy from the fabric store needs a seamstress, and you, girl, need to go back to school." That's how, a week after our arrival, my mother got a job at Good Return Fabric Store as a seamstress. The salary was modest, but enough for us to rent a small room in a nearby boarding house and support ourselves. And I, to my joy, was enrolled in the local high school, where I could continue the studies that I loved so much. Adapting to the new city wasn't easy. Cincinnati was much bigger than Hazard, with its concrete buildings, paved streets, and constant movement. The heat was even more intense, and in the first months we suffered with fevers and different food. But there was something liberating about being anonymous, about walking the streets without the weight of judging looks or malicious whispers. Nobody there knew our past. Nobody knew about my sick father or Adam and his dark intentions. At school, I made friends quickly. My English teacher, Mrs. Eleanor, soon noticed my interest in books and began to lend me volumes from her personal library. I read everything I could, often by candlelight to save on electricity, which was expensive for our tight budget. My mother also flourished in this new life. Away from the oppressive shadow of my father, she revealed talents and a personality that I barely knew. Her sewing was praised for its precision and creativity. Soon she was making not just repairs, but creating dresses and blouses that became popular among the store's customers. Gradually, she began to smile more, to speak louder, to occupy space. A year after our arrival in Cincinnati, we managed to move to a small house, but our own, in the North Side neighborhood. It was made of wood, like most houses in the region, and was on a lot shared with 2 other families. But it had a little yard where my mother planted herbs, chives, and a tomato plant, essential for the sauces she learned to make with a neighbor from Italy. It was at this time that we met who would become our extended family, the Taylors. Mr. Theodore Taylor worked at City Hall, and his wife, Mrs. Myrtle, sold lunches in front of the school where I studied. They had 2 older children who had already left home, and a daughter my age, Susan, who soon became my best friend. The Taylors adopted us in a way. They invited us for Sunday lunches, included us in birthday parties, took us to spend Christmas with them. Mr. Taylor became the positive male figure that I never had in my life. Patient, gentle, respectful. Observing how he treated Mrs. Myrtle with affection and equality, I began to understand that not all men were like my father or Adam. In 1973, when I was 15 years old, an unexpected event changed the course of our lives once again. A letter arrived from Hazard, sent by Mrs. Clara. In it, the old herb lady told us that Adam had died in an accident at the mine. A cave-in had fallen on him while he was working, killing him instantly. My mother read the letter in silence, then carefully folded it and kept it in the drawer of the dresser. "I don't wish death on anyone," she said finally. "But I confess that I feel a relief. Now we can really move forward without looking back." And that's what we did. With Mr. Taylor's help, I got a scholarship at the best school in Cincinnati to finish high school. My mother, in turn, set up her own small sewing atelier in the back of our house, after the popularity of her work grew beyond the fabric store. In 1976, at 18 years old, I was accepted to study education at the University of Cincinnati. I was the first person in my family to enter a university. On the day of the result, my mother cried with joy, and the Taylors organized a surprise party to celebrate. "See, Janet," said Mrs. Myrtle, hugging me. "Your father said that studying wasn't for girls, but look at you now, entering the university. This is to show that we should never let others decide what we can or cannot do." It was during college that I met Elijah, a young history teacher who would become my husband years later. He was different from any man I had known, cultured, gentle, respectful. Our courtship lasted throughout the period of graduation, with him encouraging me at every step, celebrating my achievements as if they were his own. Looking back, I see that our desperate escape from hazard wasn't just a physical escape, but the beginning of a much deeper journey of liberation. Liberation from fear, from submission, from limits imposed by others. Each small achievement, the first job, the own house, the entry to university, was a step away from that frightened girl I once was. And my mother, my silent warrior, was my greatest example. The woman who for years lowered her head and accepted her husband's abuses found the courage, at the most critical moment, to say no. To break the cycle, to protect me, to risk everything for an uncertain but free future. Today, when I look at my granddaughters, strong and determined, I know that something of my mother's courage lives in them too. And this, my dears, is the greatest legacy we could leave, the certainty that we can always start over. We can always say no to what diminishes us. We can always choose a different path. Today, at 67 years old, my life in Louisville is peaceful and full of blessings. I live in the same house in the Highlands neighborhood, but now renovated and expanded, with a spacious porch from where I observe the movement of the street and the sunset over the neighboring rooftops. The years have been kind to me, and despite the wrinkles and white hair, I feel more alive and fulfilled than I ever imagined possible in those dark days of my youth. Elijah and I got married in 1980, after I graduated in education. He was always a companion in the truest sense of the word, sharing the responsibilities of the house, supporting me in my decisions, treating me as an equal. We built together a life based on mutual respect, something that I didn't even know was possible after growing up seeing my parents' relationship. Our daughter, Clara, was born in 1982, named in honor of that herb lady who changed our destiny. Today she is a pediatrician, graduated from the University of Kentucky. She married Michael, a forest engineer, and gave me 2 grandchildren who are the light of my days, Marina, 12 years old, and Lucas, 8. My mother, Dolores, lived with us until her passing in 2010, at 82 years old. In the last years of her life, she became a completely different person from that submissive woman I knew in childhood. She was cheerful, talkative, loved to participate in community parties, and passed her sewing knowledge to many young women in the neighborhood. She died peacefully, surrounded by love, having known her great-granddaughter Marina. My days now are occupied with small pleasures. In the morning, I make my lace craft, an art that I learned from an elderly lady from New England who moved to our street about 15 years ago. In the afternoons, I often receive my grandchildren after school. I teach them not only school subjects, after all, I was a teacher for 35 years before retiring, but mainly values and stories of our family and our region. With Marina, my smart and curious little granddaughter, I share stories about strong women I knew, including softened versions of her great-grandmother's story. I want her to grow up knowing that she has the right to be respected, that she can choose her own path, that her voice matters. With Lucas, so sensitive and gentle, I cultivate these same qualities. I see in him the chance to help create a man different from those who marked my childhood so negatively. On weekends, our house fills with voices and laughter. Clara and Michael come for lunch, sometimes bringing friends. Elijah, even at 72 years old, still insists on preparing his specialty, grilled fish. I have dear friends, like Mrs. Susan, my friend since adolescence, and her husband, Mr. Raymond. Together we play dominoes on the porch while remembering stories from other times. I'm grateful for each day that dawns. When I wake up and see the sun coming through the window, I think of the frightened girl I once was, in that somber house in Hazard, and I can hardly believe the transformation. The pain didn't completely disappear. Certain wounds never fully heal. But I learned to live with it, to integrate it as part of my story without letting it define me. Some nights I still wake up startled, with my heart beating fast, fragments of nightmares escaping through the crack of consciousness. On days of storm, when the thunder is very strong, I still instinctively curl up, a reflex from those days when I hid from my father's shouts. But now I know they are just memories, that I am safe, that I built a home where fear has no place. And that, my dears, is perhaps the greatest victory, creating an environment of love and respect so different from that in which I grew up. Seeing my daughter and my grandchildren grow up without the weight of constant fear, seeing them flourish in their individualities, knowing that they are unconditionally loved. It's as if each of their smiles erased a bit of the pain of the past, as if each hug rebuilt something that was broken a long time ago. My dears, now that I've shared my story with you, I want to leave some words for those who may be going through difficult situations, similar to those I faced. Because life has these things. It puts us in trials that seem impossible to overcome, but also gives us the necessary strength to move forward. If you are in a situation of abuse, of fear, of submission, I want you to know, from the bottom of my heart, you are not alone. And more importantly, you deserve a dignified life. You deserve respect. You deserve to be treated with kindness. Nobody, not a father, not a husband, not a boss, not anyone, has the right to make you feel less than you are. I learned that age doesn't define our strength, but rather our capacity to start over each day. Even at almost 70 years old, I still feel like I'm learning and growing, discovering new ways to be happy. My wrinkles are survival maps. Each one tells a story of pain overcome. When I look in the mirror, I see not just the signs of time, but the marks of a warrior who didn't give up. Life taught me that even in the deepest darkness, our inner light never goes out. Even in those terrible days in Hazard, when I thought there would be no way out, there was a flame of hope that refused to die. I never allowed my dignity to be stolen, even when they tried to take everything from me. Because, in the end, that's what defines us, not what others do to us, but how we choose to respond. I discovered that we are stronger than we imagine, especially when we think we can't take it anymore. It's precisely when we're at the bottom of the well that we discover resources we didn't even know we had. Time doesn't heal all wounds, but it teaches us to live with them and still smile. Even today, certain memories hurt, certain noises scare me, but I learned not to let the past steal my present. My story is not about what they did to me, but about how I chose to respond. I chose to be more than a victim. I chose to be a survivor, a woman who rebuilt her life and helped others do the same. If you are facing difficult days now, remember, courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision that something is more important than that fear. For me, it was my future, my dignity, and later my daughter and my grandchildren. Find your reason to be strong and hold on to it. And now, my dears, I need to make a very special request. If this video touched your heart, hit the subscribe button and activate the bell right now. Each subscription to this channel means that my story is reaching more people who may need to hear that it's possible to overcome difficult moments. Even more importantly, share this video immediately with some woman you know who may be suffering in silence. Be the Mrs. Clara in someone's life. Your action could literally save a person from years of suffering. Do you know someone who is living in an abusive situation? Or maybe you yourself are going through this. Leave a comment saying just the word courage so that I know you watched until the end, and so that other people know they are not alone in this fight. Do it now. Don't wait even one more minute. Because, my dears, what I never told anyone until today is that, in the weeks after my father's death, I found a hidden diary where he listed all the girls in the neighborhood he planned to offer to Adam after me. Some were no more than 10 years old. By saving me, my mother and Mrs. Clara saved many other children without even knowing it. And that is something that will accompany me until my last breath. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Grandparents' Tales, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Your support means the world to me.